So a few years ago, I'd reached a bit of a crossroads in my career. I'd worked in large corporates and didn't really feel that I could really add any more value there. I'd gone through a couple of startup experiences and loved the buzz and the vibe of starting up something from scratch. And as chance would have it, I bumped into a former colleague who was working at the time and still is as a business coach, and he suggested that with my business experience and my experience of nurturing and growing teams, business coaching would be an ideal thing for me to move on to next. So it took a while for it to happen, and after a few months, I'd gone through my training. I'd gone to the States and gone through the training with Gazelles, and then set about building up my business coaching practice. So I've been a coach for a long time. When you are in senior leadership and senior management positions, you inevitably have a role as a coach with your teams and indeed with people in other people's teams. That's just part of being a leader and part of being a manager. I became a business coach in 2015, and since then I've been working pretty much exclusively as a business coach, just working within that sort of construct, working as someone who is asking rather than telling. So the distinction between coaching, asking, and consulting, telling. And to be honest, that's where I feel more comfortable being these days. That's a good question. I didn't start off as a business coach with Gazelles. I actually started off with another coaching organisation, an Australian-based coaching organisation. And although I found that their material was beautifully packaged, I found that it didn't really have quite so much substance to it. And that's very, very different to Gazelles, to scaling up. What I realised was that although it wasn't quite so brilliantly assembled and packaged, the marketing wasn't quite so slick, there was a lot of substance within the Gazelles framework and the scaling up framework specifically that was lacking with the other organisation I was with. So once I'd made that determination, it was a relatively easy decision to move across to Gazelles, and I certainly don't regret doing that at this point. It's been a great journey. Looking forward for it to continue. My approach to coaching, I guess, is quite an empathic approach. I genuinely believe that you get the best from people when you can build very, very strong, very, very close relationships. When you get to know someone to the point where their guards come down naturally and with agreement of both parties. So I see myself as an empathic, as an emotional coach. And my role as a coach is really to hold the CEO and the CEO's leadership team to account. So there are times when that empathic approach has to give way to a little bit more of a accountability type of role. But that doesn't mean you can't do it with empathy. CEOs and their leaders, they're all people, and no one is perfect. And as a coach, I'm not perfect, but I find that I can build very, very good relationships with teams quickly, and those relationships go very, very deep. And when you're able to create that sort of bond with a leadership team, you start to see some magic happen, and that's awesome to watch. So out of the four decisions: people, strategy, execution, and cash, I guess my key strength areas are the areas of strategy and execution. I guess they're the ones that I would lead with. When I engage with a new client, the first thing we do is really go about building out a one-page strategic plan that covers the strategy of the organisation, their core purpose and their core values, and also their long-term and their medium-term goals, before we then move into the execution side for the year and for the quarter. But having said that, I also do put a big focus on people, because at the end of the day, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you haven't got the right people on the team, it's all for nothing. There's no point really. And also on the cash side of things, although it's not one of my strengths, I find that's less of a limitation for me because the Gazelle's tools around cash, particularly the cash conversion cycle, the power of one, and also the labour efficiency ratios, they allow a non-accountant like me to be able to still make a big difference to businesses in the cash area, and particularly around the area of cash flow management. So I would lead with strategy and execution, but I would say that people and cash are certainly not in the background. They're key areas for me as well. And you have to strike that balance between the four disciplines. As you go into different organisations, they're going to have different problems in different areas, and you've got to be able to talk to all of those areas. My favourite scaling up tool. Now that's a hard one. Look, I would say that although a moment ago I mentioned that strategy and execution were my strength areas, the tools that I probably get the most value out of are not actually in those areas. They're in the areas of people and cash. The first one probably being the functional accountability chart. For the instant clarity it gives leadership teams when they look at the makeup of their leadership team and who is accountable for what and where the gaps and the overlaps and the overloads are. And the other tool that I love using is the cash conversion cycle, because often that's what makes the real difference to a client straight away. If you go through the cash conversion cycle exercise, you can often uncover some significant spare money that they didn't know that they had, and just by looking at how money moves through the organisation in a different way, often in ways that they've not thought of before. It just hasn't occurred to them. So yeah, I'd say that the functional accountability chart and the cash conversion cycle tools are my two favourite scaling up tools. Without a doubt, it's the 2-day strategic planning sessions. The energy and the outputs you get from those 2 days are quite phenomenal, and Vern and his team have done an amazing job of putting together that one-page plan. It really does make a massive difference to businesses. So the buzz I get from finishing off a 2-day strategic planning session is immense, and my wife always knows when I've come back from one of those sessions, because I come back on a real high. I come back really buzzing. There's so much energy in those sessions, and I as a coach I feed off that energy. It's quite stunning.